I'm Loretta Saff, and I am a retirement coach. And often that immediately raises eyebrows with, like, what's a retirement coach? And why would I need a retirement coach? I know what I'm going to do when I retire. I'm going to drink my coffee and I'm going to read the paper and just enjoy not having a schedule. And I think that's all fine and nice, but the bottom line is, by the time you read your paper and you have your coffee, it's about 10 o'clock in the morning. And so I decided that maybe in order to help people figure out what it is that they're going to do after they retire, that I would start this podcast called Resources for a Modern Retirement. And this gentleman that you see with me is someone I want you to meet in a few minutes, but I'll just tell you that his name is Dan Aronoff, and he's going to tell us a lot about what he does. But first, I'm going to tell you what I do. As a retirement coach, I help people plan for what is coming next. As I mentioned, people think they've got this. That's fine. And some people do. Some people immediately just transition easily into those next 20 or 30 years that they have ahead. So often people think that, like, oh, it's fine. It's not a problem. I'll figure out something. But when retirement is not what it used to be. Retirement used to be that around 60, 65, you would stop working, and then maybe you would have active years of 5, 7, if you're healthy, a little bit longer, but really nothing like what we see today, where people have 20 or 30 years to look forward to and to think about how they are going to spend their time. And so I work with people to help them figure it out, because having a plan, trust me, is really much better than not having a plan. And I deal, let me say right up front, with the non-financial part of retirement. You can deal with your financial advisor to make sure that 401k looks good. And that's another thing I hear very often. I don't know what I'm going to do after I retire, but I can tell you that my bank account looks pretty good. Mm-hmm. And I have met many, a very comfortable person, let's say, who really comes in saying, well, I found that I don't feel fulfilled and I don't know what to do next. I'm sort of missing that time in the office, or being the boss, or having the friends that are, all of my friends, my work friends. So what a retirement coach actually does is work with you to figure out, who are you now? So often, we don't stop to say who we are. Instead, we think, I'll just continue going along the way I am. But when you're 20 and 25, what are you trying to do? You're trying to get that next promotion. You're looking to get the bigger house and maybe go on that next vacation or something and make more money. Whereas now you've been there and done that, and you are instead trying to figure out what other things you want to do now that you've reached those goals. We talk about, what is a perfect retirement to you? It's amazing when you ask people what it is that they deem is a perfect retirement. There's a lot of hemming and hawing, and I usually make them write it down. We talk about, like, what's the perfect week? What's the perfect day? Things of that sort. So it helps you try to really figure it out. And even most importantly, I talk to people about what it is now at this time in life that makes them feel fulfilled, makes them feel valued, because all those things are so important. And I decided to start this video stream because I feel that very often people do not know what's out there, what possibilities there are for them to choose from in retirement. The beauty of retirement, by the way, generally is that you can try different things. And if you find that it's not quite right, then maybe you can change. Somehow you can get out of it, or you can sell what it is that you thought you were going to do, or just change gears altogether. And sometimes, nature kind of throws you a hardball and you've got to figure out what to do too. So resilience, having that plan, understanding who you are, all these things are so very important. So the first person I want you to meet in terms of my resources that I'm going to be offering, which by the way, I'll have resources that have everything to do with, maybe you want to meet a travel agent who deals in people who are retired, but who have different interests in the retirement world. Maybe you want to talk to someone about volunteering and what it means to volunteer and where, what's the best way, how to approach it. And maybe, which brings me to Dan, maybe you want to own your own business. And so with pleasure, I introduce you to Dan Aronoff. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Loretta. So glad to be here, and I applaud everything that you do. I'm sure you're providing such a valued resource to your clients. So the pleasure is all mine.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I have a lot of questions for you, so I hope you'll help me understand, as well as all of the people out there, what you do, how you do it, and then maybe we could even at some point have a chat room open where people could offer questions or thoughts, et cetera, et cetera. So tell us a little bit about FranNet.
Well, FranNet is a international franchise consulting firm. It's been around for over 30 years, and we've got offices all over the United States and Canada. I am the FranNet consultant in Tennessee. And very simply, think of us as franchise matchmakers. We help people find out if business ownership is right for them, and if so, what franchise would be the best fit. And we go through a methodical process to help them figure that out.
Well, wait a minute. Let me think about that. I think franchise, and I think McDonald's, and I think Subway, and I think dollars, dollars, dollars. Does it take a lot of money to actually have a franchise?
Well, it depends. Everybody's going to have their own idea of what's expensive and not expensive. But I'll give you some perspective. So about 46% of all franchises have a total investment that's $250,000 or less, and about 20% that are $100,000 or less. So, not to say that $100,000 or $250,000 isn't a lot of money, but in relation to, say, a McDonald's or hotels like Marriott and whatnot, which can be multi-million-dollar investments, $250,000 or less can be much more palatable. And, from a funding standpoint, we'll generally tell people, if you put down 25% of your own money, we can help them figure out the best funding options. So, you don't have to be a millionaire to get into a franchise.
Well, that's really interesting because very often I'll see clients, especially, businessmen or businesswomen who have been in that working world and sort of maybe in a supervisory situation. And when they are retiring, as much as they think it was zippity doo dah, I'm going to have a great time, they miss that world of owning a business or running a business. Why do you think, since I deal with retirees, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering what percentage of your interested franchise owners are people who have retired from one business and might be looking for another?
Right. I wouldn't say it's a huge percentage, but I would definitely say we're seeing this become a more prominent trend. Ironically, the first placement that I ever did with FranNet 15 years ago was a gentleman that wanted to get his two sons involved in a sign business. He was already retired, and he wanted to position his kids for success and to mentor them and get them started in a business, kind of show them the ropes, and probably even more importantly than that, have an opportunity to actually spend some time with his kids. I mean, how rewarding would that be? So We're definitely seeing this trend, Loretta. And, I think a lot of parents are concerned about, um, their kids finding stability in the job market, and a lot of them aren't, you know, necessarily fulfilled with their career. So, we definitely are seeing a lot more parents wanting to get involved in helping their kids start a business. So, yeah, it's definitely a more prominent trend.
Well, but now I think also my retirees very often want some flexibility in terms of schedules. I mean, that's one of the things
Hmm.
they're running away from. So
Yeah,
how
yeah.
does that fit? Do they have to be someone that is longing for that schedule again?
That's a great question. I think you're right. In most cases, they're going to want to have that flexibility. There are quite a few franchises that we would say can be run on a semi absentee owner basis, which implies that you are essentially managing a manager. Now, in most cases, when you have that type of a model, it is a much simpler business operation. And not all businesses are going to fit into that category, so it really depends on the franchise model. And what I would tell anybody is talk to franchisees that are in that system and really get an idea of the time allocation needed to succeed in that business, and does it meet your expectations. But yes, there are franchise models that would lend itself to being run on a semi-absentee basis.
Well, tell me about if I were a person coming to you, I say, "Hey, Dan, I saw you on this website or discussion that you had with Loretta, and tell me more about it. What do you do in terms of vetting? I guess is a good word as to whether or
Mhm.
not I would be a good person for. I mean, I like to be a boss. I like to own things, and then I
Sure.
just tell everybody that I own a business."
Yeah, I mean, it kind of starts off with basic education. Maybe they've attended, or we encourage them to attend a webinar, business ownership exploration. And it leads to a conversation, and me really trying to understand their why. What's prompted them to say, hey, business ownership is something that I have an interest in. Kind of the process really begins by us having them complete our proprietary assessment, and then we would schedule a formal consultation and share the assessment results with them.
Wait a minute, how much is this costing?
Excellent question. Zero. The process is totally free to the individual because I get compensated by the franchisor if I make a placement. So very similar to an executive recruiter.
So that if I have 30 questions over a period of like a month and I want to call you, you're available to answer me even though I am not paying you?
That is correct.
Wow.
There is never a fee. And in most cases, this process is going to take 30 to 90 days.
Um,
So that assessment leads to us building a business model, and we then begin to determine which franchises ultimately would be the best fit. I introduce them to the franchisors, and then I guide them through the due diligence process. It's a good process.
you mentioned something about putting them in touch with other people who have a similar franchise. Did I hear you say that right?
Well, it's what we would call the validation stage. And so if an individual is exploring a franchise, there's going to be a point in time during their due diligence where they will speak with individual franchisees in that franchise. And that way they can ask them very pointed questions of how's the experience been? Are you doing well? If you had to do it over again, would you still buy this franchise? You know, that's a critical part of their due diligence.
Is there a sort of a profile of the type of person who would be a good candidate? You know, suppose I've never really owned a business, but
Hmm.
I'm good at something. And so I think maybe I'm good with people, or maybe I'm good with numbers, and I'm
Yeah,
thinking I can do the accounting or something. Is
sure.
that enough?
Well, I mean, again, I think the assessment that we have them take is critical because it's going to give us an idea of their motivations, their interests, their financial capabilities, their skill sets, their past experiences. All this stuff is going to help us better figure out, one, is business ownership going to be their cup of tea? Is this something that's going to help them achieve their personal, professional, and financial goals? And if it is, how do we weave in all these motivations, skill sets, interests into determining the best franchise fit for them?
I see. You mentioned about the father-son or the father-daughter situation where they might want a legacy for themselves, or might just rescue their kids who they think really need some help.
Yeah.
Do you embrace both, or do you suggest to the father, or do you find out right away how involved does the father want to be, and who's the boss here? Are they equal?
Well, yeah, in those instances, I want to get their kids involved in the process too. And, what you don't want is a parent um, that has a desire to get their kids involved in a business, but the kids don't have any interest. So everybody needs to be on the same page. I need to get a clear idea of what their expectations and goals are. And then we can really start to get down to preferences. In other words, what roles would they play in the business? Do they want a business that requires more marketing versus selling? How many employees do they want? Do they want a franchise that's younger or more established franchise? Again, all part of the assessment process. I apologize for my uh, earbuds keep on popping out. I hope it's not annoying to your audience.
No, I'm sure. High
But
technology, eye earbuds, it's all part of that
yeah,
world.
yeah.
Um, uh, so after I deal with you, if I'm your fictitious customer or client, possible client, what is my relationship with the franchise? What's the word? Franchise or?
Or
Uh-huh.
franchisor.
Hmm.
Well, if the client goes through the process and we determine the perfect fit for them, then they would sign the agreement. And now the franchisor is going to take them through a very methodical process, very extensive training, ongoing support for the life of the franchise. I mean, if this works out the way that it should be a mutually beneficial arrangement for both parties.
Well, how much creativity would a person have? I know if I go, and again, McDonald's, I know we're not talking about McDonald's because that's much more expensive, but I go into a McDonald's or even a Subway or some of these places, everything looks the same. The counter
Mm-hmm.
is here, the menu is there. And
Right.
is that the directive from above with most franchises, or do I have a moment or two to put in my own creativity? Because if I want to own my own business,
Right.
then I want to be able to put myself into it.
Yeah. That's a great question. What I would say, generally speaking, is, when you buy into a franchise, you're going to have to be willing to work within that system. And they're going to have some requirements and regulations that you need to adhere to. If somebody is a little bit more entrepreneurial in spirit and they want a bit more latitude, they may find a younger emerging growth franchise to fit the bill. Because oftentimes a younger franchise is going to be a bit more nimble. They're going to be trying out a lot of new things. And so, if somebody needs that latitude, that younger franchise might be a better fit than, say, a very established franchise that's been there and done that. They have the formula down pat. They're probably not going to be as open to ideas, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Well, sure, but you would be able to guide them toward that if that probably comes out in an interview. And
Oh, that's a big part of the assessment process. By all means, I'm gonna get an idea of what their preferences are for an emerging growth franchise versus an established franchise.
so now you mentioned there's a variety or a broad spectrum, I guess, of the amount of money that's necessary to perhaps put down to become a franchise owner. But then, does the franchise help me set up if I have a question? I assume at that point you are no longer part of it. Instead, the franchise has the relationship with me. Are they charging me more?
No, I mean, when you sign on for that, you're going to pay a franchise fee, and then there may be some other costs associated with training and marketing. But no, I mean, part of why you're buying into a franchise is for that franchisor to provide you robust training and ongoing support. So in most cases, it's going to be part of those initial fees that you paid for, a big part of it from the franchise fee.
And will they help with just the setting up of the business and the marketing and
Hmm.
the accounting and all of the different things that are necessary, and maybe even hiring?
Yeah, I mean, yes to all your questions. Most of the franchisors are going to have robust CRMs and point of sale systems so that you can, track your customer transactions, do your accounting. So you'll have that. A lot of them will have marketing strategies and collateral already in place. And a lot of the franchisors will assist in hiring. I don't want to say that every single one of them. I mean, it is dependent on the franchise, but a lot of them will assist you in helping you identify staff for you. So yeah, by all means.
And do they determine where my restaurant, my business, my Molly Maids should the
Hmm.
territory to cover?
Well, when you sign the franchise agreement, you will, in most cases, specifically identify your territory. Now, where you actually place your business, if it's a brick and mortar business, you'll work with the franchisor's real estate team. Most are going to have a national relationship, and you'll work with that commercial real estate team to identify the best place to put your franchise. What I would say is, work with the franchisor's resources. They know what works. And take heed to their advice, but the franchisor also knows that you've got to be happy. And so you're going to have expectations and preferences. And so, it's a joint venture, so to speak.
Um, it's very exciting. Now, you just mentioned brick and mortar, and I think in today's world, how about virtual? Do you deal with virtual, and what percentage of your franchises are virtual?
Not a lot that are 100% virtual. Some are, but not a lot. And to be honest with you, a lot of the franchises, even the brick and mortar, as a result of the pandemic, actually now have a virtual platform where they're engaging with customers too. So you're seeing a blend of both. But we do have some kind of home base consulting type businesses that could be entirely virtual.
Hmm, interesting.
And
Um,
that was even before the pandemic, those existed.
tell me a little bit more about the assessment tool that you mentioned.
Yeah, the assessment, that's a proprietary tool that FranNet created over 20 years ago. And it essentially assesses an individual's motivations, interests, goals, the reasons why they want to get into business. And Loretta, it basically gives us a better picture of their preferences, how to best leverage their skill sets, their past experiences, and help them determine how to best achieve their personal, professional, and financial goals. It gives us a profile summary that plays a big, big part in how we match people up with franchises. Because what we've done is we've had our franchisors in our inventory interview their successful franchisees. And so we have their profile of their successful franchisees. And based on how an individual scores in our assessment, that's how we start doing the matchmaking. So there's a lot of science to it and a lot of art too. I mean, you got to have a blend of kind of the science and then really through conversation, understanding what they're all about.
Sure, that's what I was just going to say, is that I assume it's not all written, fill in the blank or choose A, B, C, or D, that a lot of it is on your shoulders also to be the expert, to get a feeling for who you're dealing with and what they really want.
The assessment is a starting point for us to have a conversation. And it doesn't all come together until we've had that consultation and I build their business model and off we go. But you know what? This is still a process. So as one is speaking with 3 or 4 different franchises, they're also learning what they like and what they don't like. And so sometimes we've got to revise that model and maybe look at some other franchises. So it's a pretty evolutionary process.
My goodness, you're describing coaching.
Yeah, there you go.
That.
There you go.
Really, it's very similar, because when you're dealing with individuals, you need to learn what it is their goals are, or what their goals are and how they function, because people often they think they want something, and then when they talk it through and they're challenged according to something that they've said, which doesn't mix with what it is they think they want, then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, what you mean? I would imagine you mean I can't have freedom and own a business, or I can't be a person teaching water skiing if I don't own my own boat. There are lots of things that you have to go around and over with. And it's fantastic that you have such a tool and that FranNet does all of this. Now, is now a good time to be a business owner? I mean, things are pretty awful out there right now, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but what's happening in your world?
Well, I'll say this, and I said this pretty confidently even during the Great Recession 12 years ago. I do firmly believe that there's never a bad time to get into business if it's something that you really want and you've done proper due diligence. Certainly COVID has been a challenge, and interestingly enough, obviously there's some sectors that have really been hit hard and struggled. And then there's other franchise sectors that have thrived and are having their best years.
Zoom and Amazon.
Yeah, well, certainly from a technology standpoint, but, we're seeing a lot of businesses thrive in this pandemic. So, it might be that you've got to kind of zero in on the specific categories, but COVID is going to end. And some of the positives, that we've seen is, interest rates are lower. In some respects, this is kind of unfortunate, but the labor market is not nearly as tight as it was pre-pandemic. So it's going to be easier in most cases to find employees. And commercial real estate is probably a bit easier to find availability. So there's some positives. So to answer your question, I do think it's a good time to look at business ownership. And statistically, we're seeing reports that say that there is very strong interest in entrepreneurship.
Wonderful. I love to hear a positive outlook. I think that's great. Just one more question about what happens if I have tried this, and my son or daughter has tried it, and it's just not working.
Hmm.
Will the franchise company help me in terms of selling, or do I turn to you? Would you help me?
That's a that's a great question. You know, it's going to vary by franchise. Some franchisors will get very involved in helping a franchisee to find a buyer. Some may not, you know, so it depends, or they may point them into other directions. Certainly, you know, they could come to us. You know, we're not business brokers, so we don't act in that capacity, but we do work with franchisors that have a resale program. You know, so we can certainly play a part, or I can connect them with a business broker. But, you know, let's face it, everybody gets into business with an exit strategy, or at least they should. An exit strategy of sometime in the future of selling that business. You know, so you know, this is not a foreign concept. You know, the idea is, you know, when the time is right for you to get out, whether, you know, you just want to kick back and relax, or maybe it hasn't been the best experience, to then employ those strategies to help you find a buyer. You know,
Well,
so there are a lot of options, and yeah, generally speaking, the franchisor will help them in that endeavor.
that's really comforting. That's comforting to know. Are there any other insights or hints or comments that you would like to share with the audience?
You know, I would say this, and it might sound kind of simplistic and obvious, but, you know, if you have a genuine interest in learning more about business ownership, you know, you really owe it to yourself to look. A lot of people out there, Loretta, have a desire to do their own thing, but they never look. You know, and it's because of the obvious things like fear, the cost, risk, things like that. Um, but you're never going to really know until you devote the time to research this. And our process is a good way to do that. It's a safe process. There's no cost. We're not going to pressure into anybody making a decision. You know what? If you go through the process and you come to the conclusion business ownership is not your cup of tea, well, then you can say you looked. And now you can focus on other things. And the last comment that I would make is, you know, when you go into this, and I always tell my clients this, go into this keeping an open mind, because what you think might be the best business for you on the front end, in most cases, is not. I would say that without any question, the majority of the franchises that our clients have bought, those businesses were never on their radar.
Wow, that's fabulous.
So it's a really fascinating and productive process
Well, it
for them to
really
go through.
shows the service that you offer so that they don't veer off the road that they're going down and end up in somewhere where they never really wanted to be and they're not good at it. So good for
Hmm.
you. Do
Yeah.
you have something you could put up for us with your contact information?
Um, well, holy cow! I don't know if I have something that I could bring up. You'd have to share screen, and it might fumbling me all the way through. But here, I'll tell you what. Why don't I just keep it low tech?
Good. That's good.
They they can reach They can reach me at frannet.com, which is www.frannet.com.
And again, it's Dan Aronoff.
Dan
Thank you.
Aronoff, if they plug in the zip code in Tennessee, I will pop up.
That's fabulous. Thank you. And I am going to try to share my screen here. Let's see. It doesn't want to let me share my screen. How odd. There it goes. Um, and I'm not seeing what I want here either. So that's rather odd. You know, you just have to love it. You have to love
Well, you know what?
technology.
That's the one thing with this pandemic. It's forced us into this world of technology, and you know, I have to say it's certainly been a learning curve. But hey, you know what? I think we're managing okay. What do you think?
I absolutely think so. Well, again, to reach me, it's coachingwithloretta.com, and you can go directly to my website and talk to me about any retirement issues that you might have, or just let's talk, because I think that sometimes you think you know what you're doing when you might need just a little bit of help to straighten things out. Or if you get stuck, suppose you have already retired and that honeymoon phase of the first 6 months has come and gone. If you feel like maybe you'd like to talk, we can talk for 15 minutes or so, and I won't charge you either. So there, Dan
How
and I
about
are
that?
a great team for you to contact to help you with all of your retirement things that you need. And I hope that you will look for my stream at another time when we'll come up with more resources for you for when you're ready to retire, and to make sure it's really a modern retirement. Thanks, Dan. Thank you,
Pleasure.
everybody.
Really appreciate it. All right. Well, take care.
Bye.